Hi, welcome to Copenhagen. Thanks for dropping in. Hope everybody is doing well. Today I want to try something a little bit different. I've been thinking about what people do while they diamond paint. Some people, like me, listen to music. Some people watch television. Some people watch movies. Some people listen to podcasts. And I was thinking about it, and when I start these videos from the very beginning, I've always started with Welcome to Copenhagen. Recently I have started going out and doing YouTube lives in Copenhagen to let people see the city and just talk about Copenhagen. We've already been and visited the Little Mermaid statue, Hans Christian Andersen statue, the Royal Palaces, various bits and pieces, but there's still a lot more to see, so I will be doing more lives in Copenhagen. But I thought about maybe doing some things talking about Copenhagen, Hans Christian Andersen, Hans Christian Andersen stories, and just different things that maybe about Copenhagen itself, maybe about Denmark. There's a lot of interesting things, so I thought maybe I could do these on YouTube and people could, rather than having like a video like this where you're sort of trying to work and look at the same time, basically just talking. So the idea is I do a little introduction and then I'll do a podcast. So you don't need to look at the screen and you can just listen, learn a bit about Copenhagen, Denmark, that sort of thing. So I've already mentioned Hans Christian Andersen. It's difficult not to talk about Copenhagen and not mention Hans Christian Andersen, Denmark's most famous writer. He is known for children's fairy tales such as The Little Mermaid, The Emperor's New Clothes, The Ugly Duckling, Thumbelina. But he also wrote a lot of other stories that maybe aren't as popular or as well known. He actually wrote 168 stories. So I thought it would be interesting to try and read all of Hans Christian Andersen's stories, starting at the beginning. So starting with the first story that was published and then work my way through until the last one. Whether that will actually happen, I don't know. It's a tall ask, I think, but I'm going to give it a try. But before I do the stories, I thought I would do one about Hans Christian Andersen himself, Hans Christian Andersen's life and how he became the most famous writer in Denmark, and the challenges that he had getting there. It's quite an interesting story. There are things that I didn't know. I didn't know that Hans Christian Andersen suffered from dyslexia, and I didn't know that his classmates and his teachers laughed at him when he said he wanted to be a writer. But he got the last laugh, as they say, and became Denmark's most famous writer. So today I want to talk about Hans Christian Andersen's life. Hi, welcome to Copenhagen. Thanks for dropping in. In this episode we will be learning about Hans Christian Andersen, Denmark's most famous writer. Hans Christian Andersen was born on April 2nd, 1805 in the Danish city of Odense, which is the main city on the island of Funen and lies 104 miles or 167 kilometres to the southwest of Copenhagen. He was the only child born to Hans Andersen Sr. and Anne-Marie Arnoldstatter. His father was a shoemaker and thought himself to be related to nobility, as his mother had always told him that their family had once upon a time belonged to a higher social class. A young Andersen was introduced to literature by his father, who would read him works like Arabian Nights. In 1816, however, Hans Andersen Sr. died. Andersen's mother was uneducated, illiterate, and working as a washerwoman. In 1818, she remarried. Andersen received a basic education at a local school for poor children. His mother had never been pleased with his storytelling, so she had him apprentice with a weaver. For a very brief period of time, he worked at a tobacco factory, but then apprenticed for a tailor. Despite his mother's attempts, Andersen never lost his love for storytelling. At age 14, he moved to Copenhagen in hopes of getting a job as an actor. The first 3 years in Copenhagen, though, were full of poverty. An excellent soprano, he joined a boys' choir, where he made an extremely small wage. As his voice began to change, his career in the choir came to an end. When he attempted ballet, he realised that his body was not fit for it, and a career in ballet would not be plausible. Desperate to do whatever he could, Andersen tried and failed at manual labour. It wasn't until 3 years after he had moved that he met Jonas Collin, the director of the Royal Danish Theatre. Collin had already seen and read some of the works by Andersen. He had published The Ghost of Palnatoke Grave in 1822, and thought the 17-year-old was promising. When he approached King Frederick VI, he was able to convince him to pay for Andersen to be educated. There is speculation that Andersen may have been the illegitimate son of the king due to this. Andersen began attending grammar school located in Slagelse. He also attended school in Helsingør. Both towns were close to Copenhagen and located on the island of Zealand. Andersen was never a great student. The other students alienated him and his teachers mocked him because he wanted to become an author. Historians believe that he most likely suffered from dyslexia, contributing to why he had such difficulties in school. Jonas Collins decided to remove Andersen from the school in Helsingør due to the abuse he was getting. He still wanted Andersen to finish his education though, so he arranged for him to finish his studies with a private tutor in Copenhagen. Andersen was 23 when he completed the exams required to enter the prestigious University of Copenhagen in 1828. Andersen published a short story in 1829 called A Journey on Foot from Holman's Canal to the east point of Amager, finally giving him some success after years of hard work. It was about a character who met characters like St. Peter and even a talking cat. Not long after, he published a theatre piece called Love on St. Nicholas Church Tower and a collection of poems. His first works were not very notable. It would be many more years until his works became noteworthy. The king gave him a grant for travelling in 1833. Andersen spent 16 months travelling through Europe in Germany, Switzerland, Italy and France. On this trip, Andersen discovered a love for travel and was especially fond of Italy. He would go on 20 more extended journeys in his life, and about 15 years were spent out of Denmark. "To travel is to live," is one of his most famous quotes. He also wrote many travel stories that gained him some popularity. Andersen also kept a home in Nyhavn, which is in Copenhagen, as he travelled. In 1835, Hans Christian Andersen published his first novel, The Improvisator. The autobiography was immediately successful. Originally, Andersen had written fairy tales that were revisions of those he was told as a child. His original fairy tales were not met with much recognition at first, though. In 1835-37, he published a collection of 9 fairy tales called Fairy Tales Told for Children, First Collection. This collection included The Emperor's New Clothes, The Little Mermaid, The Princess and the Pea, Thumbelina, and The Tinderbox. His stories were not recognised at first, selling quite poorly. Meanwhile, he was becoming more successful with 2 novels he had written, O.T. in 1836 and Only a Fiddler in 1837. In 1844, another one of his most well-known fairy tales, The Snow Queen, was published in first volume, second collection. Inspired by Scandinavianism, when visiting Sweden in 1837, Andersen wrote a poem to convey how the Swedes, Danes and Norwegians were related. While visiting the island of Funen, he began writing a poem called I Am a Scandinavian. By the early 1840s, Andersen was also earning some foreign success. When he visited Germany in 1846 and England the following year, he was hailed as a famous dignitary. In June 1847, Andersen paid his first visit to England and enjoyed a triumphal social success during the summer. The Countess of Blessington invited him to her parties where intellectual people could meet, and it was at one such party that he met Charles Dickens for the first time. They shook hands and walked to the veranda, about which Andersen wrote in his diary, "We had come to the veranda. I was so happy to see and speak to England's now living writer, whom I love the most." The two authors respected each other's work and shared something important in common as writers: depictions of the poor and the underclass, who often had difficult lives affected by both the Industrial Revolution and by abject poverty. In the Victorian era, there was a growing sympathy for children and an idealisation of the innocence of childhood. 10 years later, Andersen visited England again, primarily to meet Dickens. He extended a brief visit to Dickens' home at Gad's Hill Place into a 5-week stay, to the distress of Dickens' family. After Andersen was told to leave, Dickens gradually stopped all correspondence between them, to the great disappointment and confusion of Andersen, who had quite enjoyed the visit and never understood why his letters went unanswered. Throughout the years, he would become even more successful across the world. When he would travel, they treated him like a pillar of society. At home in Denmark, he had many opponents who believed that Andersen was not deserving of praise. His stories would go on to be translated into more than 125 different languages, and by the time of his death, he was honoured by England as the greatest living author. Andersen continued writing and publishing his fairy tales until 1872. During the spring of 1872, Andersen was severely hurt when he fell out of bed. He would never really recover from these injuries. Not long after, he also began showing signs of liver cancer. Shortly before his death, Andersen had consulted a composer about the music for his funeral, saying, "Most of the people who will walk after me will be children, so make the beat keep time with little steps." On the 4th of August 1875, Hans Christian Andersen died at the age of 70 in Østerbro, Copenhagen, Denmark. At the time, he was at the home of his close friends, baker Moritz Melchior and his wife. Andersen's body was later interred in Nørrebro, Copenhagen, in the Assistens Cemetery. In late 2012, a manuscript entitled The Fallow Candle was discovered in a suitcase with documents belonging to the Plum family in the local branch of the Danish National Archives in Funen, Denmark. The first people to come across the document were a couple doing amateur research into their family history, but they thought nothing of it since it seemed unrelated to genealogy. Later, the archivist and local historian noted the document's signature and realised that it might be an original Hans Christian Andersen document. It was dedicated to a vicar's widow, one of the young Andersen's benefactors, and was written in the mid-1920s, which means that Andersen was around 20 years old when he wrote it. One scholar argued that the tale was lacking Andersen's sense of humour, probably to impress his benefactress, who had paid for his education. Danish experts confirmed its authorship in December 2012. If you visit Copenhagen today, you can see a statue of Hans Christian Andersen beside Copenhagen City Hall, facing across Hans Christian Andersen Boulevard towards Tivoli, the second oldest amusement park in the world. There is also a second, less visited statue in Kongshav, very close to Rosenborg Castle. The Hans Christian Andersen Museum is situated in the house where he was born in Odense. The annual Hans Christian Andersen Marathon, established in 2000, is held in Odense, and Hans Christian Andersen's birthday, the 2nd of April, is celebrated worldwide as International Children's Book Day. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please remember to hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you later. So that was a brief look over Hans Christian Andersen's life. I think you'll agree it's quite an interesting story. He was definitely a very interesting character, and as I said, he is buried in Copenhagen. So that was it. I'd be very interested in feedback. Again, this was just an idea. Whether people are actually interested in hearing more. I think the next one I'll do will be the first Hans Christian Andersen story. But rather than just being the guy that reads Hans Christian Andersen, I'm going to throw in different things about Denmark that you may not know, and hopefully you find interesting, or sometimes amusing stories as well. So that's it for today. If you want to catch any more of these podcasts or YouTube podcasts, please subscribe and hit the notification button. And as always, I will be doing diamond painting unboxings, unbaggings, comparisons, just talking about pretty much anything to do with diamond painting. But as I said, I thought I would just do something a little bit different. Hopefully people enjoy it while they diamond paint. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and in the meantime, take care, be safe, and wash your hands.